This episode of Success Through Connections is brought to you by Legacy Realty Group, North Florida. The team that treats your home, your time, and your goals as top priority. Real people, real results, real care.
Welcome back to Success Through Connections. This week, I have a really cool guest with us. His name is Robert Plank. And Robert is a podcaster himself. And we're going to talk all about podcasting today and the things that he's doing. Because what he does is he takes the tech part out of the equation for the person who's creating this podcast, which is paramount for me because I am such a non-techie. So we're going to talk about that today. And first of all, I wanted to tell you how I made a connection with Robert. So I'm on LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn. And he basically reached out to me and said, "Hey, I have a podcast I'd like for you to be on." And it went from there. I was on his podcast. It was quite a while ago, but I'm returning the favor, I guess you could say. But I just think it's so relevant what he wants to talk about, because I always hear that people want to do a podcast and they think, oh, I'm just going to get on my computer and start talking and it's just going to be great and it's going to go viral. Not that easy, is it, Robert?
No, not so much.
So we're going to talk about that. So first of all, welcome, Robert. I'm so glad that you're here with Success Through Connections. I'm really glad we connected.
Happy to be here. We've known each other 18 months. That was a year and a half ago when we connected, and it's led to all these things.
Time flies when you're having fun. I
Yeah.
didn't know it'd been 18 months. Wow. I did not know. Well, I want to get started with your journey. Tell our listeners how you got into podcasting. What drew you to it in the first place?
What drew me to it was this idea that you need to create content, right? If you choose your favorite guru, your favorite expert, you say, who's my favorite realtor? It's Miss Zelda. Well, I'll Google search her, I'll YouTube search her. And boy, if there's only 2 search results about you, if there's only 2 YouTube videos about you, you think, man, this lady Zelda, she must not have been in business for very long, right? But likewise, if you find all these podcasts, all of the social media, all these posts, you're like, okay, now she's really serious, right? She's consistent. She posts all these things. But the problem is when to find time for it, right? Because you're doing the client work, you're building the websites, chasing the leads. It's like, when is there time to create all that content? And it used to be that they say, well, make a blog, right? Write some articles,
Yeah.
To say, well, what are 5 tips on how to decorate your home? List 3 steps on doing an open house. And it's like, well, who has time for all that? And then you end up feeling like you're back in school writing a term paper. And then what's it really for, right? You spend hours to make a post, you put it out there, it's on your website. Who really even sees it? Versus the new way of doing it, which is what we're doing right now, right? Podcasting. You're on camera, which like maybe it was a little awkward to be on camera before the pandemic, but that's just how we do it now, right? All about that telepresence. You get on, you have a conversation, you talk with interesting guests, or you are a guest, or you do the solo episodes and you talk about amazing things. You put it on YouTube, you put it on the Reels, you put it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and now with these AI tools, you transcribe it, you morph it into blog posts, and now you get the result that you were hoping to get by making the content, by having the authority, but you do it with these connections, with meeting people, and it's a way better way of going about it. So podcasting, you have conversations, you record stuff, and you cut it up and use it in many different ways.
So how did you come up? What was the origin of, I know your podcast is called Marketer of the Day. Did you have like a marketing background? Is that what your background is? Or how did the Marketer of the Day come about? And what was your goal when you started it?
So what happened was, probably when I was 12 years old, I was really good at computers and really good at programming. And I don't know about you, Zelda, but sometimes there's something that you come across and your brain just lights on fire. And you're just like, I'm really good at this. I eat, sleep, and dream about it. I could stay up for 2 days straight just writing code and programming stuff. I can code faster than I can write or talk. And it was a lot of fun. But then, and I was like, make all these little doodads and projects. But when I looked up what a career path like that would be like, there were like 2 options. There was, well, you can kind of stay at like a $30,000-$40,000 a year little like sort of code monkey grunt worker and other people tell you what to do, or you eventually become so good that you become more of a middle manager administrator, and then you can get up into like $140,000 a year, maybe move to the big city, San Francisco Bay Area, work at some startup, but then you don't get to do the fun stuff anymore, right? You're telling other people what to do. And it's like, are those the only two choices? Like be the grunt worker or be the kind of the boss pushing other people around? And I knew a lot of people after college who kind of did this whole exchange of they made a lot of money, but they were super busy and they had a high cost of living and they had to commute. And I was like, none of that sounds like fun. So starting my own business was a lot more fun and I could have my cake and eat it too. I could work on these fun projects, create this fun software and kind of set my own hours, do my own thing. And then so creating all the software, like that was kind of fun. But then that led to creating information products and membership sites and doing webinars and kind of saying, well, here's this tool, right? Here's this membership plugin, here's this pop-up plugin, and then here's this like training that's related to it. And then that was fun, but then what held me back at that point was this idea of traffic, right? Because we all want to make that social post and we get a bunch of comments or we send an email and get a bunch of sales, but that was always the limiting factor. And you'd always look into like, do I run Facebook ads? Do I run Google ads? And that was always so hit or miss. And then what is a consistent traffic source, what worked well for me is this idea of podcasting, where you meet with people, you connect with them, you create content with them, and sometimes you work on the person themselves, right? You get a guest, you say maybe this person can be a client, or if it's not the case, then you sort of put each other in the friend zone and you say, well, maybe we can refer each other to other people. And you combine that with LinkedIn, like you said, how we met, you can meet people all day, every day. And now you have something that's a lot of fun. And the hurdle that it required me getting over was this kind of the social awkwardness, social anxiety, which I mean, a lot of people have, but it's once you get past it, it's a lot of fun. And so that's how podcasting came to be for me, was didn't want to be stuck in the career path, but then also in the entrepreneur, self-employed sort of path. I didn't want to be stuck as like just the coder, just the guy behind the computer, just the like working for someone else. So then I kind of had to get out of my comfort zone and have these conversations, and it's consistent traffic and consistent content doing podcasting.
So it's like a few things struck with me really quickly. It's like when you were talking about when you were 12 and you were coding, I thought, oh my gosh, they didn't even have computers when I was 12. Well, if they did, they were elementary. That's for sure. They weren't even around. So that tells you something about my age.
And the world's changed so much since I was 12 and even
gosh.
more when you were 12.
Oh,
And it continues to change.
Is it? And it's all good. So you got into the podcasting, but then you got into this niche of the technical part. To me, I'm a baby boomer, so you obviously, and that's where I think people get into the overwhelm. They don't understand the technology about it. So what was it that made you switch and go the light bulb that said, I think I'm going to really hone in on the tech overwhelm portions of this industry of podcasting?
Well, I've always been technically minded, but technology has never been easy. And they say they try to make it simpler, but like now it's like, hey, you click a website and you don't have to transfer files anymore. But yeah, but now there's like 50 ways to make a website. There's all these menus. And even like when I help my mom go and like hook up the smart TV, boy, all those times you have to type in those weird codes and you have to use the remote and the letters and the numbers. So it's still not easy and someone still needs to make things simple. And so as far as when it comes to making a podcast, if you try to do it all yourself, including the technical stuff, it's so easy to fail, right? Because there's all this context switching. You say, okay, well, I want to meet someone cool like Zelda and have a conversation. Oh, well, I need to do the microphone. I need to record the video. I need to edit the video. I need to add music. Need to add text. Need to find these little clips. And then you end up spending like 80% of your time doing all this $5, $10 an hour work and only a little sliver of your time doing the 50, 100-hour work, which is meeting people. And so I came across, I even had this similar frustration myself. Like right now I'm close to 1,400 podcast episodes, but once I was at like 200 and 300, I almost burned out so many times. Like we all want to like have a podcast, have a show, have it be consistent, put something out every week. But I would sometimes go like 2 months without a new show because I was just trying to get caught up on the backlog. And so it was really scary because we don't want to do all this work and make this show with hundreds of episodes, then it just stops. And then it's like, it was all for nothing. We want to keep the machine going. And so I had that problem of just the switching, and then I'd go in and I'd hire people now and then to manage my podcast. And, we've all heard of these sites like Fiverr, right? We find someone, oh, they're so cheap, they're so good. but then you keep having to go through different people. And then maybe if you find someone good, they'll last for a while, then they'll quit or they'll get lazy. And so I felt like I was like forever dating, right? I was just, as soon as I was going through bad people, when I found someone good, they wouldn't last. And so I needed something consistent. And so I ended up just building my own team. And I got to the point where I had a son and I worked from home and my wife would work from home also, but we were still like juggling a lot of stuff. And I said, like I can't do it all myself for a ton of reasons, right? I have to have a team. And then it was a lot of fun just figuring out some of those managerial skills, right? Like outsourcing the grunt work, the things that I didn't want to do to them. And then I was able to then focus on that bigger picture. And things even as simple as like naming my show. Like I didn't know what to name my show. I called it the Robert Plank Show for I think 400 episodes. And then once I had a little bit of breathing room, I freed up some mental space. I was like, hey, let's call it something that people will actually search for.
It has to evolve. It has to evolve.
Yeah.
It's like you
It has.
start and you're not sure where it's really going, and then you get into the rhythm and you figure it out. And so then you
Oh,
come
yeah.
up with your name. You mentioned Fiverr. I'm like, yeah, I can talk. I can definitely, all these people on these Fiverr and Upwork, they're great for some things, but I discovered, which was very costly to discover, that many of the experts, because they all said, "Well, I'm an expert, I'm an expert." They're not so much experts. So it's very hard to find the right experts. I know that when you and I first talked, I did not realize that you had all of this podcast. I thought you were just a podcaster, just that was all you did. I didn't realize the background until afterwards that, oh, you do all these other things. You produce the podcasters. You can be the podcast manager. You can do the editing. People don't realize that there's so much more than just this conversation. That's then taking those, like you said, the show notes, taking the reels, and then the time consuming task of sending it out there. And I know that your company, I believe, does all of that. Am I right?
We
Yeah.
do all of that, and we like to make it simple
Yeah.
because going back to entering the code on the TV, like it ends up something supposed to be simple and it's more complicated. So the way that my service works is whatever content you create and what's ideal are these like Zoom interviews like we're doing right now. What's ideal is if you can block out like 20 minutes, have a conversation, get to know someone, figure out their uniqueness, their struggles, their secret sauce, you record an amazing conversation, and then, Zoom just in one click saves the video. You just send that video to me and my team, and we figure out all that stuff. We figure out the music, the title, the show notes, which is like the text that goes like below the podcast, below the YouTube video. If you mention any links, we look up the social contact details for your guests. We cut it up into 59-second reels to put on TikTok and YouTube Shorts. We make the graphics for Instagram, the tweets, because when people look you up, if you're like not on one of these platforms, if you're just not on LinkedIn, not on Facebook, that's weird, right? There's these expectations. They want you to be on like
old fashioned. That's the yellow pages telephone book. That's your old fashioned newspaper where you're taking out the ads. That's modern day, today's world of how you market your business. So let me ask you, when a lot of people, they want a podcast, what do you think are the top 3 things that you need to do to make yourself the standout podcaster, or to make you don't have to be the one, but to make yours stand out? There should be a few things that really make you stand out.
Yeah, and if you're putting me on the spot, making me think of 3 things, I
Okay,
would say
come up with less.
it's okay. Well, it's okay. I just have to make sure to keep it in my head. The first one is to just get started, right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of people think about stuff, and how many situations have we been in life where we spent more time stressing ourselves out about something, and when we finally did it, we're like, why didn't I do that months ago? Oh, I was stressing out about doing my taxes or
You
making
think it
that
has to
phone
be
call.
perfect, and there's no such thing. It's never going to be perfect, and you're always tweaking it, right?
Yeah.
Because they want to think it has. Just do it, like you're saying. Just do it.
And most of the time, perfectionism is procrastination in disguise anyway. And the way that it will evolve, it's way different than you ever imagined. So
Yeah.
it's important to just bite the bullet and do it and get something recorded. And that's the first thing. And the second is to be consistent. Don't just record a podcast and take 6 months off. Have somewhat of a plan. And if that's something that worries you or you struggle with, then focus on the people, right? Your brand, Zelda, is success through connections. So if you think, well, I'm not sure if I would be able to record 20 whole minutes every single week, well, you don't have to revisit it every week. You can get a few episodes in the buffer. You could say, okay, well, every week, a month is about 4, sometimes 5 weeks. So if I just can have 4 meetings, then that's something that's already in process. So are there 4 people that I already know? And you don't have to think about like who is someone new I can meet. Who do you know? Who haven't you spoken to in the last year? So if we say, hey, it's been a while since I spoke to Zelda, let's see if she can already be in my podcast. So someone that you already know, like a mentor or a peer or someone just to catch up on, or a vendor or an existing client. Like a lot of people just neglect that there's people already in your circle and you can strengthen your relationship with them and record this thing together. And no matter who they are, once you have something recorded, you can always go back and follow up with them, right? You have an excuse.
So, one of the things that I've learned also is like I have mine is a weekly show. So I make sure that I have 4 to 5, depending on, like you said, who's in there, who I've got, how many weeks in the month there are. But I've also noticed that, in fact, my manager has said sometimes the best episodes are the ones where you record your own knowledge on whatever it is your expertise is. And so I do that on occasion sometimes. And those can also be great for fillers, or if you've got some really good content that you want to share, it's sharing your own tips and advice. So you don't have to always have a guest.
Right.
Yeah.
And especially if it's one of those situations where someone asks you like a really simple question, you're like, oh my gosh, I hadn't even thought about getting it in such a simple term like that, right? Like even if someone asks you, Zelda, like, well, explain closing costs to me, right? Like what are they? I hear that sometimes like we can split them, or who pays them, or if I do this kind of realtor, I don't need to pay it. Like simple question like that can spur just a video that someone is already searching for and looking through to find you. And also to squeeze in, you said give you 3 tips, right? So I said number 1, just get started. Number 2, be consistent. And the third one to sneak in here is think about what your format is, and think about what maybe your 4 or 5 default questions are. Like, I think you and I are good at acting on the spot, and sometimes if there's a thread in a conversation, you say, I'll follow that. But it's good to have a plan, right? It's good to be somewhat prepared. And so I have like a little bit of a list of questions in my head. If I'm starting a podcast interview, I'll like read someone's bio. I'll ask them about what makes them focused or passionate. I'll maybe have the next question, like try to make sure I fully understand what they do and what solution they provide. Then I'll think about, and then I'll get into something like, well, can you tell me a story about how you struggled? Or can you tell me about a client success story? Or you can tell me a way like you're unique? Or can you tell me about something in your industry that kind of makes you angry that's not done correctly that you can speak up about? And then by that time, we're near the end of that interview. And then one of my favorite questions is I like to ask someone about what's the missing question in the conversation? What should I be asking you? I just don't know what to ask you. And that really gives us some real gold at the end. And then I plug some links, drop some URLs. And at the very end, I ask for a quote or lesson that has served them that they can pass on to us. And anyone's free to steal that format or start with that, and then as you repeat, do the iterations, you make it your own. But I find it helps just to say like, hey, what's my default structure, my default format? And so at the very least, even if it's the most horrible podcast and there's no energy, there's no spark, hey, I can still go through those default questions. And so
And it happens. It absolutely happens. Yeah. But
oh yeah.
I always have a plan.
Ooh, good.
I always follow it, but I have a plan. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to. So, what are some of the basic essentials that someone needs to start a podcast?
Camera and microphone.
There you go. Camera.
Yeah.
And lighting. Lighting. I
Ooh,
think you
yes.
need lighting. I think you need a good lighting. So,
Yeah.
what is the common mistake that people make about podcast production or editing? I think we kind of covered it, but that's important. That editing.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's a few little mistakes, and there's always like you can probably look at anyone's podcast or YouTube and find a few things that you don't like, or things that maybe you realize you do, and seeing it on them makes you think, hey, maybe I should rethink that. And one that comes to mind is just not having a quick hook. It's really tempting and easy to say, okay, here's the name of the show, and here's the show's tagline, and here's this 1 minute video and music, and let me read a couple of ads, and then let me tell you the guest name, and then let me get to it, and now you're like 3 minutes in.
I'm
And
going to
and
hit
we've
delete already and miss it. See, that's so
yeah.
much stuff.
Yeah, and in this day and age with these short attention spans, it's all about the hook. And so what I do many times is when I have a podcast going, especially with a guest, with a computer, you can dock your Zoom or your camera on one side and then have like a web browser on the other. And so what I do is I pull, and right now I have your LinkedIn on the kind of the other side here, Zelda. So you pull up your guest LinkedIn. If they give you a bio, if they give you their website, pull those things up. And then if they have like a YouTube channel, I have your Go Zelda on another tab as well. So you have some resources, but I take their LinkedIn bio plus the bio they gave me, I paste it into Chat GPT and I say, can you word an introduction for this person? Like they'll be on my podcast, I'm introducing them. Can you start with a compelling hook? Can you give someone like 2 reasons to tune in and pay attention right now? And you start with that, right? Instead of meandering, you say, hey, this is what's so important. Here's the urgent problem. Here's why Zelda is uniquely qualified to help us out. And it's just like, cool. If someone's just flipping through the YouTube channels and they are only paying attention to you for 10 seconds, it's like, cool. Can you earn the next 3 minutes by saying, here's what we'll do? And then you leading with a promise for those 3 minutes and you say, okay, now I've got you on the hook for the next 20 minutes. But it's so just not done enough, so underrated, this idea of a hook.
So how can we change it up a bit? How can entrepreneurs use podcasting to grow their brand, grow their business?
So you need to repeat a lot of what you say, right? You figure if you're a realtor, people have a million questions about buying a home, about selling a home, about neighborhoods, about Jacksonville, Florida, right? Like you can think of like hundreds of questions. And so that's why it's important to have a podcast to crank out the content to address all those questions, to catch all that search traffic. And then when someone looks on your social media profile, they need to see that you update it regularly. So that's the first thing. It's just be aware of content, what people are looking for, providing it for them, staying relevant. And then there's also this other dimension to it where we've mentioned this idea of connections and meeting people. And and any of us who's on LinkedIn, we've seen these spam messages, right? You get a message, it's like 2 pages long. They say, let me tell you about me and my website. Let me sell you some stuff. No one's ever interested. But then, so how do you break through? And you break through by saying, hey, I saw you on LinkedIn. I see you do this and this. I do that and that. Would you like to be a guest on my podcast? So now you're leading with value. Now you're saying, well, I'm not here to sell you something that might come later, but I'm just looking right now to buy you dinner first, right? I'm looking to just get that relationship started. And just having a podcast filters out the speakers from the non-speakers, right? Because a lot of people are rude or they're hesitant to be on a podcast, and that's fine. They're not serious business people. Or maybe they just don't like you, right? Maybe it's not a good fit, but
They're
you
just
say, hey,
uncomfortable being on camera.
yeah, there's a million reasons, but you want to separate the people that are worth you speaking to versus those that aren't. And if someone can agree to be on a podcast, schedule a time, if they show up, they deliver good content, then that's like a quality connection. And then that's someone that then you follow up later on. You say, hey, here's the episode that's live. You post it on all your socials. You tag them. You follow up with them again. You say, hey, here's some stuff to help promote. And Google has all these cool acronyms, right? And there's one called EEAT, which is Experience, Expertise, Authoritativeness, Trust. And what they want to say is, well, if Zelda is a realtor, is she just there by herself, or is she surrounded by other realtors, by real estate investors, by high net worth individuals? What sort of company does she hang around with? If she's posting on social, is it zero comments, zero comments? If she's not interacting with others, or does she have a network of friends? And Google says, well, if someone has a lot of different friends, then they will elevate you. And so podcasting is really valuable with this problem all of us adults have, which is how the heck do we make friends, right? When you were a kid, you were in school, you had classmates, it was built in, you had sports, you had stuff like that. But as an adult, well, what do? It's really easy to just get stuck in your same circle of friends. So LinkedIn especially, or the social platform of your choice, you find interesting people and you see if they can be a guest on your podcast, and you see where it goes, and it leads to you get the friendship with the person, but also for publicity, Google benefits. Now you're publicly associated with that person. You got the YouTube videos, you got the podcast, you got the social posts. Now it shows that you're a connected business owner.
Yeah, that's great information, great insight. So I don't know if you want to go here or not. So if you don't want to, we'll just pivot. But I know
Okay.
that you're writing a book. You're compiling a bunch of several of the people that you've interviewed on your podcast. So I wanted to talk about that. When should it be published, and maybe some lessons that you've learned, how you included them, who you included, and why you selected them. Let's talk a little bit about that and tell people where they'll be able to purchase this book.
Of course. So we just sold the last spot last week. The website is nextlevelselfbook.com. It's my 19th compilation book. And the idea of a compilation book, it's like the Chicken Soup for the Soul books, right? You open this book and every chapter is written by a different person. And so they're the same but different. And this is, I think, the fourth compilation book I've done for myself, and I've done 15 for another client. And the idea behind the compilation book is that a lot of people just don't have all the resources, energy, time to write a whole book. It's a lot more efficient to just make a chapter. And then what I've been doing as far as a business model here is I've got all these thousands of podcast interviews and I run it through ChatGPT and do a lot of like revising and editing. And I say, based on all the good, like we extracted all the good stuff that you said and it connected it together in sort of a narrative in a way that introduces a problem, explains you as the solution, makes you look good, speaks to a specific person. And here's this book chapter. And as far as like lessons that I've learned, like there's just a lot of follow-up involved and a lot of you have to kind of play around with the size of the umbrella. I'm not sure any other way to say it, but with podcasting and with compilation books, there's a problem of being too vague and of also being too specific, right? Like if you, Zelda, said, I'm only going to have a podcast about realtors, and if I make a compilation book, it'll only be realtors in chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. And the problem with that is you're too limited that way, right? Like if someone is in a realtor book with other realtors, well, why would I promote that? I'm just promoting other realtors. But if you have more of if you had a compilation book called Success Through Connections and you had different people in your community from different walks of life and they didn't really have conflicting advice or they weren't competitors and they were different industries, then now you have something amazing and special and different. And it's not just like the same chapter on repeat from different people. And so that's the balancing act there with podcasting and with compilation books is saying like, well, am I broad enough in the type of people that I'm having on my show? That way there's enough of the variety. And am I not limiting myself? And so, yeah, with the compilation book, there's a lot of just following up, getting their chapter in there, getting everything kind of revised, getting their contact details, getting their photo, making sure everything's okay, making the physical books. And then now, as far as what I'm doing is I have 30 days before the book launch. So now I'm doing the promotion side of it, which like that's left out in a lot of stuff, right? People spend so much time making the webpage, making the book, making the podcast, getting all the way to clicking publish. And they say, okay, cool, publish, I'm done. It's like, no, the work is
Now
just
you
getting
start
started.
marketing it.
Yeah, like you just did the first 10%. Now you have to do the real hard work, which is getting the word out there and all those repetitions. So now I'm at the point where I'm building out a site, I'm marketing myself on other podcasts and talking about it. And that's where that's how you have to sell some books, right? You have to go and pursue those podcasts and speaking opportunities, which is scary outside of your comfort zone, but you have to do it.
So again, where can they get the book when it launches?
Nextlevelselfbook.com.
Nextlevelselfbook.com. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Now we're coming near the end of this podcast. Tell us, I've got one last question that I like to ask. It's my signature question. So we're called Success Through Connections because I believe that no man is an island, that you're successful because of the connections that you've created, of course, over the course of your lifetime. So can you share a story with us, Robert, about how a connection through podcasting or through your business led to a meaningful opportunity or a collaboration for you?
Of course. And it's one of my favorite kinds of connections, which is the connection that leads the connection, which leads the connection, right? Sometimes we think like, okay, I'm holding out for Mr. Right, and I'll go to some conference and I'll go on LinkedIn and I'll just find that one person and they'll solve all my problems. But it's quite a journey. And so what happened was so what happened was when I was maybe 17 years old, and I was trying to just get started doing this programming. I met some cool lady in Washington State who like said, "Hey, I need this kind of software made," and I make her little pieces of software. And then through that, I met this other guy who was like closer to my age, who was in New York City, and he said, "Hey, I saw this other software you made. Can you make this other kind?" And I wouldn't have even gotten his attention if I hadn't actually delivered and created something and sort of have that on my resume, so to speak. And then I knew him for a while, but then he got kind of busy. Like he decided to become a lawyer and do other things. So then I was on the hunt again to find someone else to partner up with. And then I met this guy named Jason a bunch of years later, and similar idea. Like he said, "Hey, well, I saw these other two softwares you made. Can you make this even better software?" And then that kind of ran its course. And then he knew a guy that he started paying named Lance. And then me and Lance started working together and said like that was a better fit. And then me and Lance ran a few seminars in Salt Lake City, Utah. We did like these like offline events. And then this other guy named Charles, who's from the South, he's from Alabama, who's a doctor who teaches other doctors. He came across some of our classes and our products, and he came to this event, and he joined us as like a monthly coaching client. And that was 12 years ago. And I made over $500,000 from him just from like the consulting, making the products, working for him. And it's like without all these other connections, kind of this leading to this, if one of the links in the chain was broken, I never would have met this guy. We never would have worked together. And those are just the best kinds of connections, aren't they? We're just the different parts of you look back in your life and you say, well, was it all worth it? What did it all mean? It's like, yeah, because I met this person, met that person, and this led to this chance meeting with that. And then because they knew them and that, it's a path, and it's very interesting. And that's probably my favorite kind of networking success story of my own is one leading to the next.
That's an awesome story. And that is how it works. So this is the very end of our show. Can you please tell us how our audience can find you? How can they connect with you?
Of course. On LinkedIn, I'm Robert Plank. But where I really want you to go is marketeroftheday.com, where you can check out Zelda's been on my show, and I've had all these amazing guests. So we talk about the entrepreneurial journey and the mindset and the success habits. And sometimes we have a coach, or we have a speaker, or we have an app creator. So that's marketeroftheday.com. And where I really want you to go is if you're someone who has thought about podcasting, or you failed, or the technical aspect just seems stressful, overwhelming, dfypodcast.com is my main website. You can go there, check out what's there, schedule a call, and I'd love to help you make a podcast. That way you can be freed up with big picture ideas like what to name my show, what kind of guests, how do I have these conversations, and leave all the technical stuff like how do I trim this video clip or how do I make this graphic. Leave that to me and my team. That's done for you podcasting, dfypodcast.com.
Thank you so much, Robert, for joining us today at Success Through Connections, and keep connecting because that's how you become successful.
When it comes to buying, selling, or managing your rental property, don't settle. Choose the professionals at Legacy Realty Group North Florida, the real estate company that gives you peace of mind.